What is up, everyone? Welcome to episode 15 of PogRx. I am your host, GamerDoc. A little bit of a sleep-deprived GamerDoc, but we're here. We're here and we're doing it, which is ironic because we're talking about sleep with our guest, and we have like the foremost expert in esports sleep psychology right now, but we're going to ignore that and deal with it later. My sweet dog has been a little bit ill, and so she's been really snuggly. And so she decided to sleep in between my partner and I last night, and, started dreaming and was really involved in her dream, and so started running, right? The downside to that is she weighs as much as me, and I was on her paw side, so I just get woken up to like my body rapidly gyrating from the force of golden doodle paws. Anyways, so we're going to do this. We got this. One of the things I want to talk about before we go into sleep is a question that I have been getting from a lot of people. And it's been great because people have been reaching out to me on Twitter, through email, who have listened to this podcast, which I love. Keep doing it, please. If you're listening to this podcast and you have any questions or any comments, send me a Twitter DM. Let's talk. We also have a Discord server now, so if you want to talk more about this stuff, I'm all for it. One of the things that people have been reaching out to me about is, okay, I'm good at this game. How do I get signed to a pro team, right? I'm good at this game. How do I get signed to a pro team? Which is a really good question to be asking right now, because right now it is easier to become a pro esports athlete, a pro video gamer than it ever will be, right? And what I mean by that is, yes, in 10 years, it's going to be a better life to be an esports athlete. It's going to be a better life. You're going to get paid more. You're going to have more support services. The lifestyle is going to be better. You're going to be healthier. But it's going to be harder because as we inject more money, more time, and more resources into esports, right? More and more people are putting their resources into video gaming and realize that this is a viable career path, which is amazing. It's amazing. But the subset is more people are realizing they can be a pro video gamer as a career. And it's not just the people who had the extra time or the people who had that secret sauce of empowerment from their parents and from their lifestyle and their situation that were able to put this much time and effort in. And now there's a cultural shift happening, and we are in the middle of it. And in 5 years, it's going to be much harder to be a pro gamer, to get there, because the player pool is going to be larger. And right now we have these amazing video gamers in the North American scene who are just holding us up, but there's a lot less amazing video gamers than there will be in 5-10 years. And so how do you go pro now? If you want to go pro, take the chance, take the shot. One of the most important things, talking to coaches, talking to players, talking to organizations, is that's great that you're great. We love that you're great. That's the reason why you get signed to the team. How do you stay on the team, right? Because once you get good, you have to stay good. And being coachable is something that is really overlooked early on in your career, but becomes very important later in your career, right? And what does being coachable even mean? So my thought process is, if I were to, so I had a Halloween party, a small get together, and we had pumpkins, and we had given people the stuff to decorate pumpkins, but we didn't want people to be drinking and using knives, so it was like paint and glitter and wigs and whatever. And I look over, and one of my buddies has his keys out and is chiseling into the pumpkin with his keys, which was just hilarious. So he carved a pumpkin. He carved a pumpkin with a set of keys. And it was actually a really good pumpkin. It was one of the best pumpkins I've ever seen in my entire life, because he's a very talented individual. He got to that end point. If we had started the night and I had given him a perfect set of pumpkin carving tools, he still would have gotten to that end point, but he would have gotten there a lot easier and a lot quicker, right? When you are very good at something and you got there based on hard work and what you thought was right, it is very hard to realize that there are other ways of doing things, because you got to that end point. But once you get good, you have to stay good. And how do you stay good is to keep improving, because the skill sets and the experience level and the play level is always going to go up, and you have to stay there. And at a certain point, what you've been doing is no longer going to be good enough. And that is true across all aspects of competition, right? The highest level Olympic athletes have gotten to the team based on their individual efforts, but how you stay excellent is a team effort. And what you need to do is realize that there are other tools out there that you may not even know of that can make you better. And that is what being coachable is to me, right? Realizing that you need to seek feedback. You need to seek other tools. You need to be asking questions and listening to feedback. And I get that it's hard, because in esports right now, we have anyone can call themselves a coach, right? Anyone can call themselves a coach. They might not have experience, and their advice might be trash. And you might have been given experience by people who are trash at giving advice, and you've been burned. And I get that. I get that. It's okay to be skeptical, right? But yeah, I want you to get in the thought process of, if you are in a competition, if you are playing with a teammate, ask them for feedback after. Hey, I know that in this position our communication kind of broke down. Like, what could I have done to be better in that situation? Oh, I think we were, on a different page at that point in the game. What do you think I could have done better, right? And even if that player is much worse than you, you're going to get a good piece of information. It might not be how you impact your play. You might not change your play style, but you might realize, hey, okay, if I'm playing something with less experience than me, this is what they think I'm going to do. It might not be the right thing to do, but this is what they think I'm going to do. So when that situation arises in the future, I'm going to communicate more. Hey, I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to go this way. Hey, I'm going to do this instead of that. Seek feedback from people who are better than you, worse than you, at the same level as you, and learn from it. Learn from feedback. Seek feedback, learn from feedback, be coachable. You have to be good, right? You have to be good. And how you got to being good might be different than how you stay good. And that is my talk for this intro. It's time for the PogRx. The name of the show is PogRx. So if you're gonna make the player of the game, if you're gonna be the player of the game, what is one thing you can do to get there? So let's see it. All right, clowns, time to juggle. Oh, I'm very serious. Juggling works on hand-eye coordination and primes your mind to learn new skills. Find a tennis ball, and to start, toss one ball up in the air from hand to hand. Keep your elbows at your side and try and make a smooth arc over your eyes. Once you get bored, add a second ball. With one in each hand, throw the first ball in the same arc as before. This time, when it reaches its peak, let the other one go in a similar trajectory. Once you're ready for 3, you're going to start with 2 balls in one hand and 1 in the other. Toss one of the paired balls. When it hits the top, throw the solo ball. When that hits its arc, throw the last one. Don't try and move on past this step until you can reliably do this once. You're going to be absolutely trash at this for a while, and this was probably really hard to visualize if you're on audio only. But being bad at something means you're trying new things, making more brain connections, and improving. So go learn how to juggle. All right, y'all. Hopefully you have already implemented that into your life. I mean, pause the podcast, went and did it, and now you're back, you're energized, you're ready to go. Our guest today is Dr. Daniel Bonnar. He is a clinical psychologist who specializes in the psychology of sleep. He is bringing his talents to esports and is a sleep specialist at 1HP. We are a big fan of them at this show. So please welcome Bon to the show. Welcome to the show, Dr. Daniel Bonnar, from now on known as Bon. How are you doing this evening for you?
Yeah, no, it's this evening for me. Yeah, good morning to you as well, Lindsay.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask.
And thanks for having me. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask the question that everyone probably asks when it's super annoying, and that's, how's the future? You're in
How's the future?
You're in the future.
Oh, because I'm a cop.
So dumb. Sorry, don't answer that. It's so dumb. It's so dumb.
Can you actually answer me a question, Lindsay?
Oh, yeah.
So,
okay.
Now this is just me being, maybe I'm not processing this question correctly, but when I do talk to people from the US, they often do refer to Australia as being like upside down land, right?
Yes.
Yes. Can you talk me through the logic of that? Yeah, talk me through that, because is it not relative? Are you not upside down to me? Or I don't. Do we need an astrophysicist to
Do you
explain this to me?
remember back in the day when we thought the sun revolved around the Earth instead of the other way around? Well, America still thinks that.
Right,
The
gotcha,
rest of the
okay.
world revolves around us.
So it's like an egocentric perspective
Yeah, yeah,
on,
yeah, yeah. It's not geography.
yeah,
It's
gotcha, okay.
ego. So I'm
All right,
glad
good.
we've sorted
Thanks for
that
answering
out.
that. Yeah, no, that answers it. That's perfect.
Yeah, yeah, you're welcome. So, my first question is, we got your fantastic intro, your credentials, you're amazing. Everyone I talk to
Oh,
loves
thanks so
you.
much.
So how do you specifically, as a psychologist, as a sleep psychologist, make video gamers better?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's about trying to improve their sleep, right? Which our research kind of shows, unsurprisingly, I don't think this would surprise anybody, but this is what our original research was all setting out to kind of do, was actually discover how well do professional esports athletes sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And, everyone kind of, I suppose, assume that they sleep pretty poorly. And yeah, I mean, the research is backs that up. So typically, like, based on our research, and we are talking averages, right? So of course, some people do sleep better than others. So this is not everybody,
Right.
but certainly when you're trying to look at the averages, esports athletes tend to get very little sleep. So a lot of them are actually under the kind of like recommended 7 to 9 hours. And there is some research as well to kind of suggest that sleep quality isn't fantastic, although the research is a little bit mixed on that point. So some suggest it's not great, some say it's okay. But the other thing as well, of course, that probably one of the most common issues that I come across working with professionals is that the sleep timing isn't conducive to optimal performance at their competition time. So it's kind of like a three-pronged approach. We're trying to improve sleep duration, sleep quality if that's relevant, and also sleep timing as well. That's kind of the things I focus on the most with players.
I want to talk about each of these, but I'm immediately interested in that
sure.
last one. So, sleep timing isn't conducive to the time of their competition. Now, are you talking about how esports is global right now, and for CS:GO, they're doing the major in Stockholm, and players are from all over and going now practicing at different times? Is that what you're talking about, like competition and jet lag, or something more general globally?
Well, it can be competition and jet lag. Like, I think that's the most kind of like common example that people can understand, where it's like, oh, I'm playing at like the wrong time for my body clock. But this same phenomenon of playing at the wrong time for your body clock can also play a role for people competing, like, in their actual time zone where they live. So for example, with the team that I work with, like Ground Zero, which is like a Perth-based team here in Australia, last season in RLCS, we were getting them waking up much earlier because they were playing earlier in the day. And we had to actually shift them there because they were waking up very close to competition time. And then for this season, because they're actually playing later in the day, we've actually had to move their sleep schedules later, right? To be more conducive with their competition times. So that's something that we're really active about trying to do, is about trying to move their sleep schedule to try and get the best timing for their alertness levels, because there's a natural rhythm that, as you're aware, in terms of like your circadian timing, which your body clock dictates. So there are going to be times during the day where you actually perform better than other times, and it's about trying to line those times up when they're competing. So that's one of the things that one of the most common issues I would say that exists for a lot of players is that the timing is just not quite right for competition.
So is my level of alertness generally the same as your level of alertness if we were in the same time zone, if our circadian rhythms were saying, people always talk about morning people, night people, afternoon people. So generally, is there a time after awakening that everyone is most alert? Is there more person discrepancies? How do you mold a team based on those things?
Yeah. So based on the circadian timing, right? Like, we know where, like, so for example, for someone who goes to sleep about like 11 p.m. and wakes up about 7 a.m., like, that's a pretty average kind of like like person. So for a person like that, they will kind of between about 7 to about kind of like 12, they'll be increasing in alertness. So that's a bit of a risky zone. And then about between 2 to 4 p.m., they'll actually have a dip in alertness, right? So we call it your post-lunch dip. So people naturally feel a bit more sleepy at that point in the day. And then after that, about 7 p.m., people have a peak level of alertness where they actually feel quite good. And then after about 7, as melatonin increases, right, and we start to feel sleepy, alertness levels kind of like start to crash. And that's typically obviously when our bodies feel ready to start to go to sleep. So that's the rhythm for a person with that kind of sleep timing, right, where they go to sleep at 11 and wake up at 7. But of course, you just shift the whole thing earlier or later
Right.
if someone's going to sleep earlier or later. Yeah.
So I wake up in the morning. I've been in darkness. My melatonin levels are high. And I wake up and I get exposed to sunlight. My melatonin levels go down. My alertness starts to increase. I eat lunch. I get a big insulin spike. Makes me sleepy. My evolution tells me it's time to go rest and digest because you can't fight monsters right now. And then that wears off. And then, so when in that time period am I going to be best? At 7 p.m. or at that noon time?
Yeah, about 7 p.m. That's your peak level of alertness. 7 p.m. Yeah. But then pretty soon after that, though, you start to actually come down again, right? So typically, like, I try and get players to get between like that 12 to 7. That's where you kind of want to match it up with competition timing. Because if you try and match up that 7 p.m. time with like the first game, but then you have to play like 3 or 4 games, well, then you're going to be actually coming off that peak, crashing a bit. So yeah, it's sometimes it can be difficult in terms of trying to get the correct timing. But if you know where your peaks and your troughs are, you can take action, right? Like that's the whole point, is that when you know where your sleep rhythm is, you can actually take action to mitigate the risk of any kind of like dips in alertness. So for example, with that post-lunch dip, if you know when that is, right, let's say it's at 2 o'clock for someone, you can take, for example, like caffeine 30 minutes prior to that, knowing that you're about to go into your dip so that you can mitigate the risk and like, ollie the gap, so to speak, between the peaks. The only way, like on that point, right, of trying to know where your peaks and troughs in alertness are, you really do need to have like a pretty consistent sleep schedule.
Yeah.
Because if you have a sleep schedule that kind of like is quite variable, well, then it can be more difficult to kind of actually tell where your peaks and troughs are. So it is really helpful to have a super consistent sleep schedule. So this is probably one of the other common problems I come across with people, is that players typically like have quite a variable kind of like sleep time, and then they tend to have like quite a variable wake time, and you just want to be consistent. So sleep loves consistency.
I love that. So, I mean, if I'm practicing I listen to this podcast, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to be more precise with my sleep time, more consistent with my sleep time. I'm going to go to bed at 11. I'm going to wake up at 7 and get 8 hours of sleep. Oh my God, imagine that. But then I mess up a couple times and I stay up kind of late. So it's Saturday and I don't have practice. So I should sleep in and get more and more and more sleep? Because more sleep is better, right?
It's a real balancing act, right? So this is a difficult question that you're asking, right? So typically I would say it's probably more important, if we're just talking about like scrims, I would say it's more important to keep your sleep timing where it is and kind of take the hit for like the acute sleep loss, and then get it later, which you will recover from, right? So for example, I wouldn't recommend sleeping in too late on a Saturday if you've lost a bit of sleep on a Thursday and a Friday. I'd say, probably keep your wake up time pretty consistent. You might sleep in a little bit, but you just want to reduce the variability between, your normal wake up time and that wake up time. So you want to keep it, relatively close, and then just accepting the fact that, on the Saturday, you're probably going to feel, pretty sleepy, but the benefit being that you don't mess with your sleep timing too much.
Yeah.
So I would say the benefit is keeping your sleep timing kind of where it is.
When I sleep in on the weekends, and 10 years ago I could sleep until 1 or 2, and now sleeping in is like 9. But when I sleep in on the weekends, it's so much harder for me to go to bed that night, and so then it's like it keeps just pushing back the issue. So this is great. Yeah. I want to talk about something. So I was reading all your research, obviously, and you put out a study in January of 2021. It looked at South Korean, Australian, and U.S. pro esports athletes. Um,
Yeah.
so Korean players trained longer than everyone else per day, 12 hours versus 5 hours of Australian and 6 hours of US, which just makes so much sense to me. But the
Yeah.
Korean players had higher depression scores. Can you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
you talk about that? Like,
Yeah, I mean, like it's speculation, right?
mm-hmm.
Because we didn't have, as I suppose, enough data to really dig down into what the relationship was there. So we kind of hypothesized.
Right.
I mean, they weren't getting very much sleep. So one of the potential kind of contributing factors to those depressive symptoms was the fact that they were incurring a lot of sleep loss, which we know can impact mood. So that's one mechanism potentially. Um, However, they also were training 12 to 13 hours a day. And I mean, like if you look at the general kind of like, working literature, when people are overworked, typically it does degrade their emotional state as well. So, or erode their emotional state. So that could be a contributing factor as well. Not to mention, there is some other research out that kind of showed it was a pretty small sample. So, there needs to be more research. But the Korean players in particular were under immense pressure to perform. It's a like a lot of pressure in terms of from not just in terms of performance, but also from fans. They get a lot of feedback from fans in Korea. I
Mm-hmm.
was talking about this with someone else today, actually. It's funny, but yeah. So there is just a lot of pressure, and I think if you kind of look at all of that stuff together and you put it together, that might contribute towards some of those higher kind of scores on the depression scale that we used. Yeah.
It's kind of, in science, as you know, Mrs. Moore for years, we talk about correlation versus causation. Like, is something just
Yeah.
associated with it because those set of behaviors go together, or is it directly causing it? But for sleep, we do know that if you're sleep deprived, it is harder to regulate your emotions, right? It is harder to manage stress, right? So we have all these good benefits of sleep, but then
Totally.
on the other side, it's like if you are being forced to train
Yeah.
12 hours a day, what else is going on in your life, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, you make a really good point, right? So, often when people think about the impact of sleep, they think about the direct impact on like, cognitive or physical performance.
Mm-hmm.
But as you just pointed out, there is an effect on mood as well. And that includes, as you said, kind of like emotion regulation. So, like I would love to see some research done out there looking at the link between like, the sleep of players and tilting, for example. Like, is there a bigger relationship between tilting and sleep loss?
Yeah.
And I mean, who knows? Maybe there's not, maybe there is. But it would be an interesting question to kind of look into, I think.
Yeah. I think so. For me, it's like I have a tilt personality.
Ah,
And
okay, sure.
so for me, it's like, okay, yes, my incidence of tilting might go up if I am sleep deprived,
Yeah,
but I feel like you
sure.
have to have the tilt personality to begin with. So you have to find the tilters, right? You've got to,
Yeah, oh, 100%. So you
yeah.
might be like, predisposed
Yeah.
personality-wise. And as you said, like, maybe sleep loss might amplify that tendency or inclination to kind of tilt.
So I love what you're talking about with the impact of sleep on emotional regulation, because I feel like there's a push in esports and gaming right now where there's lots of performance coaches, right? And there's lots of
Yeah,
people who
yeah,
want to focus on these finite things like mindset, like goal setting, like teamwork, which I think is fantastic, right? We need
yeah,
those
so do
skilled
I.
individuals.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing I've been thinking about is, okay, well, what are you doing about sleep? And those players don't have a sleep plan, and it's like, if you are going to take this
Mm.
amazing, beautiful frosting, buttercream frosting of mindset coaching and put it on this beautiful cake, if your milk is spoiled, that's in the
Mm.
batter, it doesn't. Your
Yeah,
cake's going to taste like shit, right? So you have to focus on sleep because sleep sets you up for success in all of these other areas,
right.
right?
Totally, yeah. So there's like sleep is foundational, right? And it goes along as well, with of course like diet and sort of fitness and exercise. Like I mean, they are exceptionally foundational. There was a not that this is like particularly relevant, but there was a study out. I think it was September last year, I think, and it was a meta review I think the title was like lifestyle psychiatry or something like that. And it was just kind of looking, and it was obviously like a review of meta analyses, right? So it was like higher order. And what it kind of found was that like sleep, exercise, and diet are just critical in terms of like mental health support. And I think exercise they labeled as like step zero in mental health treatment before psychology, before medication. Like exercise is literally the first thing anybody should do. And sleep was, was equally as foundational as exercise. So I totally agree. You need to kind of get that substrate, right. And then you can build on top of that with, all the other stuff that that goes along with working with like, performance psychologists or consultants or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree.
I think it's always whenever we talk about, the impact of diet, exercise, and nutrition on, or sleep, exercise, and nutrition on mental health disorders, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because people immediately will be like, well, you can't exercise away depression. And it's like, no, you're right. No one said that.
Yeah.
Like, if you wake up with the flu, you can go out and party until 4 a.m. and, not drink any water and eat McDonald's, and you're going to feel like even worse. You still have the flu, right? Or you can get your rest, eat a lot of vitamin C, and, do a little bit of light exercise. You still have the flu, but you're going to feel better, right? Like, so I whenever we talk about stuff like that, it's just so polarizing.
No, absolutely. I think it's one of those things, right, when you talk about like foundational factors like sleep and exercise and diet, for example, like intuitively, pretty much everyone knows that they're important, right? Like no one's like, oh, that's news to me. But at the same time, there are so many people out there not doing it, or not focusing on it, or not giving it the prioritizing it as they probably should be. So despite the fact that people have the knowledge, obviously knowledge doesn't always equal behavioral change. And I think that's the difficult bit, right? Is like, how do you translate knowledge into behavioral change? And just telling people isn't actually enough. You actually need to be able to motivate them to and give them, or try and help them develop the confidence to make those changes. And I think that's the really tricky bit for any professional working in or any space, right? Any behavioral change. Doesn't matter what it is, if it's medicine or psychology or dietetics, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's all about trying to. That's the magic ingredient. I think it's like knowledge, behavioral change, like bridging that gap.
I feel like just for like literally every existing human. They know better most of the time. They know better.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So my very last question of the show is, so the name of the show is PogRx, right? We're gonna write a prescription to get the play of the game. So you are a doctor, but this is not medical advice. If you were to write a prescription for one thing, only one thing that people can do to get better at video gaming, what are you gonna write on that prescription?
Sleep-wise? Are we talking sleep-wise?
Anything. I mean, obviously get more sleep is good, but what is the one thing they can do to do that?
Okay, so can I give you two answers to that question? Can I give you a sleep one and a general one?
All right, I'll allow it.
Okay, excellent, great. So from a sleep perspective, I'd say keep a consistent wake-up time with exposure to sunlight very soon after waking up. So that acts like an anchor for the rest of your sleep pattern and helps very much with everything else. From a general perspective, I'm a huge proponent and advocate for developing the right culture within a team. So in my opinion, if you have the right culture within a team between players and they all buy into it, you can achieve almost anything. So that's something I think every team should focus on.
Yes, I completely agree with you on both of those. I mean, I know more about the second one. You're the expert on the first one. I completely agree with you. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. So your Twitter handle has been below you this whole time, but
cool.
Where else can people find you? What do you want people to do? What's your call to action?
Oh, goodness. I think I've only got Twitter, Lindsay. I don't think I have anything else. If you want to reach out to me, hit me up on Twitter and that's fine.
Perfect.
That's my call to action. Just Twitter's probably the best way to get in contact with me.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been amazing to learn from you. I learned a lot.
Yeah, no worries.
And we hopefully will have you back on the show soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, y'all. Bon wants you to focus on your sleep. Focus on your sleep. Be consistent. Get some sunlight in the morning. It's so easy. If it's so easy, why doesn't everybody do it? Well, everyone doesn't want to be a pro esports player, right? If you want success, right? If you want to be in the top 1% of whatever skill level of what you're trying to do, you have to work like it. You have to act like it. You do. You just got to try a little bit harder. Work a little harder. That's our show. Pleasure. I'm going to go take a nap. Just kidding. My alertness is improving. I gotta go get some sunlight. I'm gonna go get some sunlight. Let's go get some sunlight. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I am your host, GamerDoc. Give me a follow on Twitter if you want. Like this podcast if you want. Follow us if you want. World's your oyster. Have a happy and a healthy week. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this show. For more information, follow GamerDoc on Twitter at GamerDoc_. And please remember, nothing in this video is medical advice. Yes, I am a doctor, and yes, you may need help. But this is the internet, and this is for entertainment and informational purposes only. Thank you, and have a very nice day.